All right. Then that means that the recording is working and I can start this webinar. Welcome, everyone. In case people join later, there will be a recording, but I hope that you enjoy the live presentation, and I think we're going to have time for questions and answers, so that's going to be exciting. So it's good afternoon for me. I'm presenting from Belgium. I don't know where you are in the world, but it's good afternoon here. And my name is Laura Bosch. I am one of the founding members of Pronovix, and one of the most publicly visible aspects of what I do is exploring the domain of developer portals, which includes my work at the jury, organizing and facilitating their work. And you may also know me as the organizer and host of the AI or API, the Docs conferences and the podcast. What I'm bringing you today is an introduction to the latest work we do for our clients, together with my colleagues from the user experience research and developer portal professional services teams. I will start with some of conceptual introduction, which I hope will be so that you cannot unhear it. And if you think in hindsight, oh, but of course, then I think that we're on the right track, because in my experience, the most important realizations are always obvious in hindsight, like the wheel. And then I will do a lightweight tour of some of the developer portals nominated in the awards last year from the financial industry that show the early signals and first iterations to closing the discovery gap, which is the point of this webinar. And I think this is a fantastic evolution in progress that we are privileged to be living through now. And I hope that you bring your excitement and your curiosity to explore what is emerging on the market right now. And I'm going to say the conclusion at the start, because I always like myself kind of presentations. So what the general conclusion of this webinar will be is the following. What we see in most financial sector developer portals is the exposure of the primitives, of course, but the discovery experience is still structured around product silos rather than buyer intent. The gap appears early in the journey, already doing search and evaluation, where teams are trying to map business outcomes like cash visibility or card payments to often fragmented API categories. This translation layer is what is sorely missing from many developer portals, and it becomes now even more critical as we are all relying more and more on AI to navigate and compare API capabilities. With smaller models fixed and operating on the edge, and also a lot of emerging competition in the financial sector space, you certainly do not want to give up on nor give away control of this translation layer. But what is this semantic gap? What is it? And to give a simplistic applied definition for our purposes here, the semantic gap in developer portals for business-to-business integrations is the loss or distortion of meaning as you move from business intent to narrative documentation, to reference documentation, to APIs, to the full system behavior. And this loss or distortion is further amplified, for example, by differences in language, structure, context, etc., etc. Any ambiguity in this chain will be filled in automatically and often incorrectly. And every step or even transformation will add noise or filter out information, in any way create distortion. So we all have experienced this very viscerally in our personal lives. To bring this example home. So for example, naming things is hard. Naming products is very hard. And talking with people is hard. Communication is hard. It's an issue. You have experienced attention span shortage, biases, and so on and so forth in personal communications. And this is also present in professional pathways. One of the key things that I do want to make clear, however, that all I am going to be showing you modeling of this space applied to developer portals. To be constructive, do remember that complexity does not get lost. It shifts maybe, but it never gets lost. So let's bring the problem space into focus. Even in well-documented systems, people rarely understand exactly how the system actually works. Teams operate on shared assumptions, implicit knowledge, and routines that are never fully articulated. So, for example, when something breaks, like a key person is suddenly unavailable, then that becomes clear that what people thought was happening and what was actually happening are not the same. And this difference, this is not an exception, this is inherent to complex systems. There are always gaps between how a system works in reality, how it is understood by its different stakeholders, and how it is described in its documentation. And so for the purposes of this webinar, let's go with the understanding of the semantic gap as the accumulation of distortions across various representations of reality. So the semantic gap that we say is an expression that we use to name all these differences, these drifts, these schisms. This is the distance between the complexity of reality and the simplified models that we use to describe and act on it. And concepts like intent, capability, solution, they're not the reality itself, they are abstractions. They are the tools that help us to navigate complexity, but they also introduce their own distortions. And because it is impossible to eliminate all these semantic gaps across a large organization or a whole ecosystem, the practical question here is not how to remove them entirely, but where should you focus? In a business-to-business context, the most useful focus at the moment is the point where the buyer tries to understand whether a provider can solve their problem. And so this is where the semantic gap becomes the discovery gap. Can the right customer understand enough to find the right solution? Traditional documentation, its role is to minimize the ambiguity within the system's own language. So from the actual system behavior to the API documentation and to its more technical narrative documentation, you are still using the system's own language. This is absolutely essential. And we cannot emphasize enough that you definitely want to own your own bricks here. Now, the new extra, the new layer, is the discovery-oriented design layer. Its job is to minimize this mismatch, the misunderstandings that come from the perspective of the explorer who is external to your system. As the organizer and orchestrator of the Developer Portal Awards, I hold sort of a unique vantage point here. Every year, the awards program also acts as a user research database, operating under strict confidentiality clauses, capturing qualitative narratives, architectural justifications, and UX strategies of some of the world's most advanced API programs. And using this position, I have run a focused inquiry into the submissions that are from the financial sector, with the primary question being the following: how do these organizations try to overcome the massive friction of discovery and evaluation in a B2B enterprise integration setup? And the data we extracted fundamentally dismantled this traditional rockstar developer journey myth. The narratives that we can see prove that the adoption of a financial API is never driven by a solo developer discovering an endpoint and then immediately writing the code. Instead, the B2B integration in this sector is a highly federated, multi-stakeholder workflow. It demands synchronized buy-in across diverse user personas, from business stakeholders assessing fitness for purpose to enterprise architects navigating deeply layered legacy systems. And by synthesizing these feature sets, the onboarding flows, and the UX design choices that are detailed in the awards nominations, I can confirm that the blueprint that we hold of this ecosystem is such. And I generated an image. Please use it both for information but also for entertainment purposes. So this is a rudimentary map, of course, but we can map this enterprise buyer team and the post-integration path across 6 distinct stages. And while every stage is critical to a successful partnership, of course, the entire journey hinges on the first step, navigating the very first hurdle successfully. Now let's look deeper. Where do the deals stall in the beginning, and how do the best portals in the industry overcome it? Zooming in a little, the search for an automated B2B integration is frequently initiated by the economic buyers and decision makers who, technical or not, have their own problem in their focus point. When these decision makers land on a traditional developer portal, they hit a complicated cognitive discovery gap, well, provided that they weren't deterred by the login wall, of course. However, the data reveals that listing them simply as non-technical or non-business misses a very critical nuance. These evaluators are often highly specialized, but their knowledge is siloed. Some are niche domain experts or business line executives, evaluating a solution from a purely commercial or compliance perspective. And yes, they could be proficient in coding, but they may or may not lack the financial sector knowledge required to fully grasp the depth and the breadth of a complex banking offering, for example. But even if they are fluent in all of these vertical layers, they might not be experts in your domain. And it's highly probable, that's the case, because at least for some people on the buyer team, that's exactly the reason why they are trying to integrate with your services, because it's not their expertise. And yes, AI will help them traverse these gaps in their knowledge, but only partially, because it all starts with their quest or their question. And when we say AI now, as of today, we're talking about a language model. It's also about the semantic proximity of words, not sense making or not for real, nor is it about seasoned experience. So the worst case scenario is that because of the question itself, your offering does not even come up on their initial shortlist. And then there is plenty of marketing research that shows that in the majority of cases, it is from the first shortlist that people will ultimately choose their winner integrator. Now, if you have made the shortlist and the products that you have on your portal are under your scrutiny, to prevent your users from becoming overwhelmed by extensive catalogs, several platforms have implemented interactive tools that act as digital concierge. Think chatbot, but there are other ways to do this. These features ask contextual questions to narrow down recommendations without breaking the user's flow. Essentially, they are automating the role of a lightweight pre-sales engineer. And at the same time, portals are actively breaking down the artificial walls that typically separate enterprise products. This cohesive approach ensures that a user researching a broader process, such as, for example, merchant onboarding flow, they can naturally find all the necessary identity verification, payment processing, and settlement APIs linked together in a single connected journey. What we see, even in the most advanced portals, is, as I said, they do expose the primitives for better or worse, but this discovery experience is still structured around product silos rather than the buyer's intent. And as I have said, this will be the conclusion, and then comes the tour. This gap appears early in the journey during the evaluation phase, where the teams are trying to map business outcomes to individual APIs or API categories. And the translation layer is missing, and this is becoming critical, mission critical, and time critical. However, we're seeing the emergent new layer across a number of leading platforms. The need for the outside-in perspective is not theoretical. This is already being implemented. And in the following some minutes, I will show some of the developer portals of global players in the financial sector Their attempts pointing toward the next evolutionary phase of developer portals as we perceive it, exploring business solutions rather than just integration endpoints. And although these may not yet have consistently shortened the journey for highly technical users, nevertheless, we consider them signals of a critical step forward, already serving as an excellent tool for introduction and onboarding of new visitors, be that human or machine. These examples are all from the nominations in the Last Dev Portal Award. And our internet is a bit acting up lately, so I have made screenshots, but I invite you to explore them yourselves. Anyway, it's probably easier to on the eye to see if it doesn't move around. So in the first example, first few examples, I want to show you the extreme of how close to the financial primitives use cases in plain English you can get, if only you tried. The WorldPay Developer Hub is recognized for its highly effective approach to organizing its platform, successfully allowing users to navigate both horizontally and vertically through the portal's substantial enterprise offerings. They're also taking notable steps addressing the challenge of directing diverse user types to the correct solution, including those who may not be deeply technical. The WorldPay portal, a while ago, added a solution wizard, which I believe is a critical step towards the future. And this ambition is exactly what is needed to help new visitors navigate complex and federated enterprises. And I have a screenshot of that, yes. So this solution finder, to my what is one of the pioneering signals that emerged. And this is a very good example of reducing the effort required to map intent to capability. And I would like to point out something that is a personal observation beyond the fact that this is just great. And that if you go down these 5 decision points, they map the space. You don't only have the choices of what they offer, you have the logical choices. And then if you play around, you might find ends of this decision tree where the end is, sorry, we don't have a matching product. And so they give you the next step possible, which is, take up direct contact. But from a human discovery perspective, I can very deeply like this because I find, especially in a chatbot, but this is just basically a chatbot played out in a static setup, that it's incredibly frustrating when you get false negatives. Just because a company doesn't have a product doesn't mean that intent for you as a user doesn't exist. So yeah, that's just a personal pointing out how great this is. Next example is the JP Morgan Payments Developer Portal. This one speaks to an emerging trend among large organizations, namely the elevated representation of a select group of APIs. This portal shows the new trend beautifully, and they're working towards the intentions, the act of creating distinct, dedicated experiences. This separation is increasingly vital as enterprise complexity demands specialized interfaces, whether for high-level marketing content or differently paced technical documentation. And here, if you go into their solution space, you can see another extreme example. In the first forking step in the solution choice, you see 4 plain English verbs. And this obviously serves as intent-shaped natural language. But there is finer points that we can't often talk about, and that is that even if your recurring visitor to your portal is highly technical, they're also benefiting from a lower cognitive load if this does the job just as well. Now, one of the most interesting phenomenon is the emergence or the re-emergence of microportals, as it is a natural complement to the federated or unified enterprise portals. We published a short article on this topic last November, and you can find it on our Knowledge Hub among the articles. Now, the fundamental goal of a microportal is to offer a highly tailored experience designed to help users explore a specific product group or functionality within a larger product portfolio. And this emphasizes the product-specific narrative, bridging the gap between technical implementation and overall business value, a layered distinction from the essential product integration documentation. Now, in isolation, in theory, you might expect the product microportal would be providing a self-contained, frictionless path from exploration all the way to adoption. But when it comes to business payments or financial services, they often still require initial setup and the conversation with sales at the least. So let's recalibrate these expectations to the complexity of reality. The content on a microportal should be comprehensive enough for a user to make a decision regarding integration or adoption. And a portal must effectively contribute to the large organizational decision-making process. And I guess you see where I'm going with this. It does matter where you have put that login wall. Next example. I don't know if this one is still online. This is a screenshot from yesterday from the BNY Global Payments and Trade. And this is a very good example of a microportal. Actually, one of the first ones that I have found for a true microportal that is adjacent to the federated marketplace. Their new federated marketplace just came out. This is a screenshot of the new one. And what is notable here is how quickly you can choose what is relevant to you without having to learn their internal terminology first. And I'm not pointing to the left nav, but I'm pointing to those four short explanations of what you can do with their APIs in very simple, plain English words of what you can do with money. This is a long way away from searching for the correct API endpoint name in a vast catalog. And what this is addressing is the discovery gap that I discussed earlier, specifically to the ability to recognize the relevant use case early. The Monite documentation portal is a little more developer-centric, but still, it's a very sophisticated structural approach. It treats their platform as a series of self-contained product modules, in their own words, such as accounts payable or accounts receivable, and they effectively function as individual microportals, even if it's on the same docs site. And my last example is the Grand Award winner of the Developer Portal Awards from last year, the North Developer Portal. They operate in a highly crowded and complex payment processing space, and this portal won the grand prize through its mastery of foundational design and storytelling. It's one of the strongest market signals that I can show you on the critical importance of guiding any user, AI included, through a well-thought-through solution pathway. For any tooling, really, and I have to emphasize AI here as well. So for any tooling to work well, the content, the foundational quality remains the prerequisite, and the ability to maintain organizational clarity and a clear story remains the most critical enduring principle for success. So if you compare this to a purely reference-driven portal, the difference is not in the correctness, it's in where the cognitive effort is sitting. Here, more of that effort is absorbed by the provider rather than being pushed onto the buyer. In other words, complexity doesn't get lost. The question is who's going to pay the adjustment cost. The North Portal achieves the remarkable feat of providing a clean story in a complicated space, and I really invite you to tour this one and all the other examples back and forth a bit yourselves later, and to see how brilliantly the portal hides all the complexity until you actually need it, so that you get an exceptionally smooth initial experience. And a personal favorite of mine is a good old table, which really does the job. I cannot wait to finally sit down with Brian and his colleagues for a conversation. Really interested in the considerations and the principles and actual practical work that went into the creation of this user experience. From some of the remarks that he said, this is deceptively simple. This is the kind of minimalism that is the follow-up on a lot of work. They have done a lot of stakeholder interviews to get to this level of clarity. So these examples of what is happening right now, these are not the financial destinations that you should just copy to your site. These are the early indicators of an evolution happening. The question is not whether this shift is happening, because it is happening. The question is how deliberately you want to approach it in your own context. And excuse me for the brilliant AI image. I hope you like it. What's becoming clear is that this is not a one-off pattern. We are seeing it emerge across different industries and platforms, which suggests that this is less about individual innovation by teams, and it's more about a broader shift in how APIs are being discovered and evaluated. And the interesting here is that most organizations already have the underlying primitives, and what's often missing is the alignment between how it is represented and how it is discovered. And ultimately, the best integrations and by proxy, the best developer portals supporting them, they succeed because they are intentionally structured to serve diverse user personas simultaneously. A well-designed platform ensures that your business leaders can explore high-level capabilities, the product managers can evaluate workflows, and developers can dive deep into technical details, all within the same unified ecosystem. And I'm not purposefully not saying agents, because it is another layer of technicalities of how you serve the same needs if they are not coming directly, but they send their agents to your portal. My colleague Chris Weber held a presentation that's directly relevant to this, and I invite you to check that out. Now, at this point is where things become difficult, because making this shift is not just a documentation exercise. This touches domain modeling, portal architecture, content strategy, how your APIs are even positioned as products. And this is the point where typically organizations ask us, okay, but how do we approach this in a structured way? So that it fits our budget, our internal pacing, and to boot, we want to bring our stakeholders along the journey. In our experience working with complex enterprise platforms, this is rarely something that can be solved in isolation, and it's not an internal job or not solely. It requires connecting internal system understanding with external discovery needs without losing the integrity of either of them. So figuring out a solution that takes care of all of this is hard. And at least in the beginning, an outside-in perspective might be the crux in our experience, making sure that to empathize with all the targeted users and involved internal teams, that you discover the hidden possibilities, and also to stand out against direct or indirect competitors. This is a strength that Pronovix as a partner can play on. If you choose to work with us, we can bring with us a full solution discovery framework and the methodology to figure out real user needs through stakeholder and client interviews, research, interactive prototyping, testing, iterating. What we aim to do is to diagnose, monitor, investigate, and address the semantic gap on our client's developer portal. Also, because that happens to be the case often, if there are more foundational UX issues, we have professional services teams with UX and technical writing experts who can support your portal to have foundationally better information architecture and adjusted workflows to support the discovery and to translate or generate user needs into solutions. And on that note, we're currently looking for pilot customers, specifically from the banking sector, or more broadly, if that fit, from the financial sector, for building this new solution layer on top of your existing developer portal. We are currently specifically focusing on AI visibility and business fit evaluations. And if you're interested, please take up contact with me. My email address for direct contact is laura@pronovix.com. That's PRONOVIX. And this was my presentation here on the semantic gap and how some of the leading portals are crossing that chasm. Our next webinar is going to be on the 5th of May. and it's going to be held by Christoph von Thoma, who is the CEO of Pronovix. He's also one of the domain authorities on the conceptual functional evolution of developer portals. So I invite you to listen to the interesting things he has observed. He's going to continue my topic based on the interviews that he most recently had and with our early results of delivering solution discovery pilots in the banking sector. He will talk about why and how portals can serve best the scanning and the reasoning behavior of agents that are sent by their users. And as a closing slide, well, I have put a URL here. If you're interested in a snapshot maturity assessment for your developer portal, you can register your interest here. We are currently running AI visibility assessments. However, if you know that you have other focus areas, especially in user experience, where you need a diagnosis, then let's talk. Because such a diagnostic assessment is kind of like the first meeting point to see whether your portal can benefit from our support and most especially our work that we do for solution discovery. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer it to the best of my abilities.